Hey, happy weekend, nerds. It's the weekend. Duh. So, of course, it's time for a brand new anime streaming showcase. If you're unfamiliar, this is where I'm able to show off my skills of watching anime over the last number of years of my life and then regurgitate what I think, my opinions, thoughts, and everything on certain series. No real rhyme or reason. It's just, hey, I watched a series and I want to talk about it. So that's it. That's what I get to do on my ass. And we're going to get started with a brand new episode. So strap in. What if, when you die, instead of whatever afterlife you believe in exists, you're transported to an incredibly small apartment with an ominous black ball and a number of other strangers in order to play a game, a hunting game to be specific, a game in which you have 1 hour to find a target and kill it, or you and the rest of your team will die in its place. You're given your supplies and your tracking equipment, but you're essentially asked to suddenly kill something that has never affected you or anyone you know, but it's either them or you. Welcome to Gantz, Hiroya Oku's long-running manga and short-lived anime series from 2004, produced by Studio Gonzo, that attempts to hold the proverbial mirror up to the selfish and survival instincts of humanity. In my opinion, Gantz was certainly a mainstay of anime in the early aughts, as I recall seeing it always lining store shelves and advertised prominently online. It was always a series I'd heard and seen a lot being discussed regarding the show, but no one really praised it much. Its manga's art was highly acclaimed, as it certainly is often stunning with its detail and its unique representations. But the story was hardly brought up as a positive. Now, after spending some time with the English anime and then reading the manga in its entirety, Gantz is a very hard series to recommend. I don't think that it's an absolutely waste of an anime or a throwaway of a manga, and there truly is a charm and style that Oku has in his art, but the anime is an absolute train wreck in this viewer's eyes. It suffers from a few of my personal hang-ups that anime adaptations often get hooked into: pacing, animation, and on the dubbing side, questionable levity with the dialogue. Episodes often have a tendency to plod and drag out scenes and moments that are just at a tooth-pulling degree. Monologues and exclamations are presented as panoramic shots, and characters stare at one another while they discuss things. Thankfully, most of Oku's art looks great, at least as long as the most of the characters are stationary. To their credit, Studio Gonzo had some shows under their belt by the time they took on Gantz, but their style of blending the CG and the cell styles simply do not work for me. There is almost a sheen of a tracer quality to a lot of the movements that's often more glaring rather than accentuating. And lastly is the dubbing. Oh my god, the dubbing in Gantz. Look, I love swearing. I love it. It's something that is simply a part of my vocabulary, my vernacular, that I'll likely never remove. But swearing can be a powerful effect by helping exclaim a sentence, and it can showcase anger or any other number of emotions. That being said, swearing for the sake of swearing is simply lazy to me. It comes off as edgy and juvenile, and people often laugh when a child swears because, haha, get it? Children aren't fully aware of what they said, what they're saying, and how it could affect someone, and it's usually reserved for something in an adult situation. That's why it's funny. But I'm not here to argue the moral ideas of people have with swearing. It's Gantz's abundance overuse of the idea that sends it into another stratosphere of obnoxiousness. Kurono Kei is the main protagonist, and he's instantly an invertebrate creation. Kei is selfish, he's reserved, and he's arguably a tragic figure, but once you hear his English voice actor open his avatar mouth, any remote affection one might attempt to flourish with Kei is gone. Chris Ayres is a marvelous voice actor, and his true efficiency with voices, and Kei's in particular, is always terrific to hear. He accurately sounds as though he's in these various situations in the characters he voices. Unfortunately, the dialogue in Gantz almost trips him up, and it completely ranks him as excruciating thanks to the near ceaseless need to have every other word be a swear. Kei's character is hardly the only one that's subscribed to this ideal either. Half of the ever-changing cast is continuously pushing, swearing, to the point where I refuse to even want to utter another swear for a while to give the language a much-needed break. Now, while I don't fully understand Japanese, nor if the subtitles were actually 100% correctly translating the Japanese dialogue for the English dubbing, there seemed to be considerably less in the original Japanese versus the English dubbing. Even the manga had less from what I read. So I'm led to believe that Funimation got a little bit of leniency and were allowed to have the characters swear as much as they did. And I fully get the logic that they have in place. If I were thrust into a world where it's kill or be killed, I'd understandably panic and swear here and there when the situation called for it. But I would hardly ever go to the extreme that a lot of Gantz's casts use and do. I'd certainly recommend, if you're checking out Gantz, go with the subs over the dubs, because I think it's a little bit more faithful in terms of dialogue. Gantz is not a pleasant story, it's not a happy story. It's not really even an uplifting story. Gantz likes to constantly harm, maim, and kill its characters in often brutal ways, and there clearly is an audience for that, for this demographic and for the genre of manga. That being said, Gantz is brutal, so if you're squeamish and you're not a fan of blood and lots of it, Gantz will not be for you. Actually, assume any and all trigger warnings you may have could likely be touched on Gantz. Series director Ichiro Itano has mentioned in interviews that his aim with Gantz was to not only push the censorship envelope, but to showcase the desensitization of society. And I definitely think Itano has succeeded in showcasing that, as Gantz is and was a success, but I'd speak for the manga to express this ideal far better. I don't aim to perceive myself as a braggart, but I like to consider myself largely desensitized to a lot of what life or even the internet can thrust my way. But I also know my limits, and I rarely seek out stuff I know that could potentially affect me on a mental level. I can stomach a manga viscerally tearing apart a character, or seeing waves and oceans of blood overtake cities. Even Junji Ito's works, which are often nightmare fuel, rarely elicit a reaction from me more than "that's gnarly." What I'm trying to say is, Gantz was once an edgier, decidedly more controversial creation in the early aughts, but it's been left to fade into obscurity because its anime lacks what makes it a substantial legacy. I've said a couple times already in this video, but the manga is a better route to intake Gantz's story. Its characters are improved upon while being more competently paced in its storytelling, and Oku's art is simply a sight to behold. I certainly recommend Gantz in its original manga form over its truncated animated sibling. Additionally, do not sleep on the Netflix exclusive Gantz Zero CG anime movie. It has inarguably some of the best, most creative animation I have ever seen. Ever. Now, companies like Pixar have obviously set a high standard for CG productions that most films like this get overlooked as a result. But I urge you, please check it out. It's a self-contained story that is from the middle of the manga storyline, but it is immediately accessible and visually striking to watch. It is what actually gave me the kick in the ass to check Gantz out in its entirety. Nonetheless, if you are a sadist on a level I will never comprehend, you may check out Gantz fully subbed and dubbed via Funimation, but I think you would be happier with Gantz's manga or Gantz Zero on Netflix. So there we are, as always, wrapped ass up in a very neat little bow. As always, thank you very much for watching. As I say every time, I sincerely love doing this. I am on a $0 budget. I do not have a Patreon. I have no intention of starting a Patreon, but essentially what helps me do this is likes and comments and things like that to just keep me going, keeping me want to do this. And I want to thank always the Laser Time crew for giving me the avenue. Their community is fantastic. They are always giving me feedback and ideas and series to check out in the future. And Caped, musical fan of lasers, hi buddy. You mentioned I should check out Shinsekai Yori from the New World from a couple years back. I have checked that series out. I never finished it though, and there was a reason for it that is escaping me at the moment, but it is in my queue. I will be watching it, so expect an ass on that in the future. I'm going to wrap this up because I'm going a little long and I'm probably taking too much of your time, and your Sundays and Saturdays are wonderful. You should spend time doing whatever you want, playing video games, watching movies, watching more ass. And I want to give a shout out again to my buddy Matthew J. He is doing an entire month of anime on his channel, Cartoons 101, and I also want to give a plug to my buddy Robert Beach, who does laser time, bonus time videos where he just pulls his favorite bits from laser time YouTube videos and sort of like a robot chicken mash, just puts them all together. They're always fantastic. I love him. And I will see you guys next week. Later.